do with questions that have been submitted by you. Go to cottoncuts.com/live to submit a question for the show. These are on the table when we get here, and you just never know where we're going to go on any given day. So today's question, the first question comes to us from Kathy Schultz. Okay, I know Kathy Schultz. Kathy is joining us from Yukon, and Kathy writes, I have quilted 2 quilts that are placed on point, and for some reason they do not lay flat. Any suggestions on how to manage my next on point quilts? Question's timely, right? Because the Liberty of London has an on point layout. And I get that, you know, this question comes up frequently whenever we're doing on point, and people get frustrated because points don't match and they get all wonky, and then it stretches out. And before you know it, you just want to throw it in the bin and don't want to look at it anymore. So some tips that I have about doing on-point quilts are to make sure that, you know, when you're doing the rows, it's just turning your picture a little bit. So it's no different than if you're doing a grid quilt. You're just going to rotate it 45 degrees. And before you know it, now you're putting together just a regular quilt, usually row by row, depending on the on point. The challenge that a lot of people have with on point is the finished perimeter of their quilt. And what happens is, since those are usually biased edges, they're going to stretch and be all wonky, especially the more you handle them, and especially the more times you're feeding these large pieces of fabric through your machine. So one of the key tricks that I've learned over the years is to make sure on those biased triangles, you're putting a basting stitch around the entire perimeter. So as you're sewing your rows together, baste those edges to kind of hold them together as much as they possibly can, so they don't stretch and end up all wavy and not lay flat on you. Now, I know basting stitch, that might not be something everyone knows because it's a common garment sewing term, but a basting stitch is almost the longest stitch length you can sew on your machine. And so it's going to put a stay stitch in, it's going to go forward, it'll put a stay stitch in, it'll go forward, and it'll put a stay stitch in. And so that way it prevents it from really stretching with all the handling that you have to do as you're making that quilt finished. Do you guys have tips on this? That's one of my biggest lessons I've learned. Once I did that, it stopped stretching out of control on me. And really the mindset of turning it 45 degrees, and then you'll have rows, and then it goes together more like a traditional quilt. And just all the basic rules still apply. Make sure you're pinning all your junctions as you're sewing those on points together. So if you guys have any tips for Kathy, Kathy is actually in the chat she's watching right now. So if you have any tips for how to finish quilts that are placed on point, Kathy, we will talk a lot more about that as we talk about Finish London Calling, because we have the on point layout there. And those instructions always have tips and tricks on how to finish it, because like I said, it's those bumpers that you have. It's the quarter square triangles on the edges that give it opportunity to stretch where you don't want it to go places you don't want to go. Let's see here. So Shashika is asking, do you use a Shashiko machine? I've actually never used a Shashiko machine. However, I know lots of folks in the chat do, so I'm sure some folks can help you with whatever question you might have there. Don't forget, we have lots of stuff coming out over the next 7 days. We have an after show tomorrow, major signups next week. It's all going to be on social media and in email, so make sure you don't lose track of all of that. And that is it for me, you guys. Everyone have a fantastic weekend. I hope you get tons of sewing in, and we will see you soon. Bye now.